Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this blue, black and red or grixis colored mid-range control deck featuring a Kefka Court Mage as our commander, voted on by my supporters on Patreon. This 5-mana 4/5 wizard, when it enters or attacks, makes each player discard a card, and then we get to draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. So if we discard a card that has multiple card types, we maybe get to draw a lot of cards in return. And then for 8 mana, we can also transform a Kefka, as well as making the opponent sacrifice a permanent of their choice. And then we get the flying Kefka, which now can maybe hit for 5, and whenever our opponent loses life in our turn, we get to draw that many cards, so that can provide a ton of extra card advantage as well. So now taking a look at our deck breakdown, I'll split things up into a few different categories, starting with the mana acceleration, ways to maybe play Kefka ahead of schedule and make it more realistic to transform Kefka for 8 mana. Then we've got a ton of spot removal and other interaction to mess with the opponent's game plan, slow them down, and other ways to potentially take over once we draw those extra cards. Then we've got a few board wipes to keep the board in check as well. And then some additional creatures that can also maybe draw cards, make mana, or prevent the opponent from doing the same. And then we've got our other card draw effects that can complement the ability from Kefka to make sure the cards keep flowing, as well as some planeswalkers to get the job done. And these are also an additional card type that's likely to draw some more cards with Kefka, should we decide to discard them instead. So overall, a very powerful deck with a lot of staples among various colors, but there's still some synergy with Kefka as well. So now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration, we get to rely on Chrome Mox and Dark Ritual to set up some busted starts. Then at 2 mana, we've got all the classics, Arcane Signet, Cold Steel Heart, Guardian Idol, Mindstone, Solar Transformer, and the Iron Crag. Then Midnight Clock at 3 mana can also be a way to eventually refresh our hand. There's the Connections, which also counts as a card draw engine, but can also make treasure tokens each turn at the cost of life. File of Galadriel can also make mana, maybe gain us some extra life or draw extra cards if we're empty-handed. The Celestus, a way to switch between day and night, which can also improve our hand. Then Worn Power Stone makes 2 mana if we get to untap with it, same as the Firemind Vessel, which makes colored mana. Then our interaction has a few counter spells, not too many, since we're more of a tap-out control deck, so we don't want to be keeping up too much mana during the opponent's turn, but we still have Wash Away, which can cheaply counter an opposing commander, and then Mana Drain, which can give us a nice mana boost to deploy our commander or maybe transform it. Then we've got some discard spells with Duress, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Thoughtseize. Then a Fatal Push with Fetch Lands to enable Revolt, as well as Lightning Bolt, our nice 1-mana removal spells. We also have Reanimate, not really a removal spell, so shouldn't belong in this category, but a cheap way to get back a creature from the graveyard by paying a life, and since Kefka forces both players to discard cards, the opponent might end up discarding some expensive creature that they're not close to casting, and then we can yoink it for 1 mana, and it's also a way to get Kefka back from the graveyard if we send it to the graveyard instead of back to the command zone. Then we've got more Planeswalker removal too, with Bitter Triumph, Shieldred's Edict, and Angrath's Rampage. Can also hit artifacts with it, same as Abrade. And then Prismari Command and Kolaghan's Command at 3 mana have multiple modes, including destroying an artifact, so our deck is pretty good at dealing with those. Then Fel the Profane is either a land or a 4-mana removal spell that can also hit creatures and planeswalkers. Virtue can take out a creature, and then later we can cast the enchantment to reanimate creatures turn after turn. And Cut to Ribbons is also a nice removal spell, dealing 4, but we can also cast it out of the graveyard with Aftermath, so we're not too sad discarding it to our own Kefka. Then we've got a few sweepers, Cyclonic Rift to bounce everything if we overload it, Toxic Deluge by paying life. There's Brotherhood's End, which can maybe also deal with artifacts, and then a Damnation to just wipe the board, preventing regeneration. Ill-Timed Explosion can also just be a draw 2 if we don't want to wipe the board with it, and the Spiteful Banditry can maybe leave some treasure tokens behind. Then our creatures include Fear of Missing Out and Baleful Strix, which are both fine individual cards, but they also happen to have multiple card types, so if we discard them with Kefka, we get to draw 2 at least. Then we've got Kroxa, which is also good to escape out of the graveyard, so we don't feel bad discarding it. Emmet can also make use of a full graveyard to eventually transform, and Vivi, another powerful card in a deck with a lot of non-creature spells to grow it to generate more mana. Shieldred can gain us a lot of life thanks to all the card draw from Kefka. Notion Thief can shut down opposing card draw effects while drawing us more cards in the process. There's Nicol Bolas, which can also be transformed in this deck with all the extra mana. And Goldspan Dragon can also count as a ramp card, making treasures that now produce 2 mana. And then our card draw includes Brainstorm, which can now be combined with our many fetch lands as well to shuffle away unwanted cards in certain matchups. There's Stock Up as another staple nowadays in blue decks. Fable can also help us ramp with a Shaman token and can also improve our hand. There's Flame of Anor, since our commander is a wizard, so we maybe get to choose several modes, including dealing damage to creatures, drawing cards, or destroying an artifact. Bolas a Citadel, another awesome way to play cards off the top of the deck by paying life. Breach the Multiverse can maybe get back a powerful creature or planeswalker from our graveyard as well as the opponents. Cruel Ultimatum has to be included if we're playing a Grixis kind of mid-range control strategy. And then Treasure Cruise can also make use of a full graveyard, great with all the cheap removal spells and fetch lands to eventually delve it for 1 or 2 mana to draw 3. And then our planeswalkers include Liliana of the Veil. Chandra can also generate additional mana with the +1 ability. And then of course if we're playing a Grixis deck, we're going to include the Nicol Bolas planeswalkers. At 5 mana there's Dragon God, and at 7 mana God Pharaoh. And at 6 mana Liliana Dreadhorde General is also quite powerful. And then the mana base has a few utility lands with Odawara. Takenuma can recur creatures or planeswalkers, and Arena of Glory can be a way to give our creatures haste, so we can maybe play Kefka with haste, so we get to trigger once when it enters, and then once again when it attacks, so that can also provide a lot of extra cards out of nowhere. And then plenty of dual lands for mana fixing, and then the fetch lands are also pretty important to fill the graveyard. They can search up the shock lands and surveil lands, so in black-red there's Blood Crypt for instance, can have it untapped at the cost of 2 life, or we can get the Theater to surveil 1 when it enters, which can further smooth out our draws or fill the graveyard. And then the fetch lands essentially give us access to all 3 colors, especially one like Polluted Delta can fetch up pretty much any dual land in the deck. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Y'shtola, so it should be a fun control battle. And our hand seems fine. Cuts just enough to deal with her. 4 toughness commander. Baleful Strix replaces itself. And then Fable can maybe set up a turn 4 Kefka already. Alright, we're getting griefed. Probably takes Fable if I had to guess. Although Treasure Cruise is also going to be a problem later in the game. They pitched Fatal Push, which could have been an answer to the Mirror token. But yeah, Fable's gone. And our opponent foretells what could be an Elrond's Epiphany. So currently don't have a 3 mana play lined up. Liliana deals with the Strix. Alright, now a Flame can deal damage to creatures only, so I guess we'll just draw 2 with it. And take it from there. Can discard a land. This also fuels my Treasure Cruise. Right, opponents did not have a land, it seems. Maybe they have a counterspell. Right, with the fetch land, I can Treasure Cruise. I guess even without it, I can. So I could leave 1 card in the graveyard. And which one's the most relevant? Probably the Strix multiple types for Delirium. Opponent's gonna Memory Lapse. So, pretty effective answer to a Delve spell. It was a Behold the Multiverse, which they foretold, so they wanted to keep up Memory Lapse, which is why they maybe didn't hit their land drop with it. Liliana makes us discard. I think Damnation is good to go. Don't expect a ton of creatures out of their deck. So, redeploy Kefka, likely gets countered. Does not. Still gonna hang on to Cut to Ribbons as an answer to Y'shtola. Alright, good to draw 2. Now Liliana can just minus to deal with Kefka, but we still got ahead as they discarded a Swords to Plowshares. And I think I do let Kefka go to the graveyard now,
Haven't you ever heard of personal space?
since we can delve it away with Treasure Cruise. So, step 1 might be Fear and discard a land. And then I can still Treasure Cruise. Chandra's not bad either. Yeah, I guess I'm not in a hurry to Treasure Cruise unless they make me discard it somehow. Then I'll be pretty sad. Chandra resolves. And we'll just deal some damage here.
This'll be easy.
Cruel Ultimatum would have been fun to cast. That's too bad. Alright, opponent had the Shieldred's Edict. Can discard Crow Mox. The Fairy can bounce the Fear.
Right on schedule. Don't worry, I got you.
But now we should finally resolve our Treasure Cruise, putting Kefka back in the command zone. So, let us start there. Could Surveil, potentially adding another card to the graveyard. Kroxa to get their last card isn't bad. Although it's fighting for the graveyard a little bit. We already have Fear. And putting Kroxa in the graveyard is still good value. So I think that's a fine starting point. How many cards do we want to delve? Can definitely get rid of some lands, which we can easily add back to the graveyard. Planeswalker's a rarer type, and then of course want to exile Kefka. Alright. With Dark Ritual, can I set up anything powerful? I guess I could get back Kroxa, but Kroxa just dies to the -2 from Liliana. So then I just go Mind Stone into Fear of Missing Out. Alright.
Trust me, I have a plan.
What does Liliana do? Likely to -2 here. Fear down.
I've always hated queens.
And our opponent's got 1 card left in hand. So, could start with Kroxa, although Kroxa also gets bounced by Teferi. How much mana do I have if I also maybe use Dark Ritual? So it's 11 total that I need for Kroxa and Kefka. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, so I could do both. Yeah, I guess we'll try both. Although, I kind of want to Kefka first, so I get an extra card out of their hand. Although if it's a counterspell, that's kind of the concern here. Given that they didn't cast Y'shtola, but of course they know about Cut to Ribbons as well. So tough call to make. Yeah, I guess we'll Kefka first. And it was a commit. So a library is risky if they end up casting the memory half, which would refresh their hand. I guess it's back to the command zone. But yeah, if they draw land here, that would be kind of a disaster now, since we would lose Kroxa and everything else. So escaping Kroxa first, as it turns out, would have been a little bit better. Now we're still ahead of mana, and their land entered tapped, so no memory for them. Can still Surveil. Should have 1 left to add another card to the graveyard. Opponent bouncing Mind Stone. They maybe should have done that first in case they drew an untapped land for memory. So we get to surveil. And a Thoughtseize. Could double check that the coast is clear. Sure. Alright, so step 1 Thoughtseize. Snapcaster for memory lapse. So yeah, now the Thoughtseize can't take anything away, but they still have memory lapse available. So that was actually the perfect counterplay. I guess I just banditry away the Snapcaster and wait on Kroxa. Probably shouldn't have tapped the red source to cast the Mind Stone. So yeah, they're gonna memory lapse the banditry. And now I don't have enough red to Dark Ritual out Kroxa, which would have been ideal. Alright, I guess we'll just cut Snapcaster, since our opponent's likely to memory next turn anyway. And then banditry would still be an answer to Y'shtola. Alright, that happens. Is there a downside to casting Dark Ritual? Probably not. Well, that's a pretty awful hand that we just drew. But a Brainstorm helps. So I can Brainstorm first. And a Bolas of Citadels, awesome. So get rid of some lands. Could also cast Kefka, although Citadel is more likely to resolve here. And then we kind of get to go off, which seems better to me. Maybe I actually should have put a fetch land on top, so I could have shuffled away the other land that we knew was there. So now I'm kind of forced to shuffle myself, and then if there's another land on top, I'll be a little sad. But that's okay. Can also get a Surveil land. Ill-timed Explosion to draw 2 for 4 life is fine. Would have loved to cast a Nicol Bolas for 7 life, now there's a land instead. So, not quite as good here, but that's alright, still have our Citadel in play. Cast Ironcrag. So yeah, a few things could have lined up better. Could have maybe had a Kroxa still on the battlefield, which would have been pretty useful. But I guess this makes the game more interesting. Does our opponent have an answer to Bolas of Citadel? It's gonna be Tasha. Can deal damage to Planeswalkers with Brotherhood's End as well. Opponent keeps up a lot of mana, and Inquisition's perfect here. Have a look for 1 life. Breach the Multiverse on top, so if they counter Nicol Bolas, I can still maybe breach it back. Opponent counters, so they're mostly tapped out here. Alright, so Bolas first. Get 2 of your cards. And our opponent concedes. Bolas joined by the Citadel here is good enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Vivi, so we need to find a hand that can easily take care of their commander, otherwise they get to go off. This hand's not the worst, but doesn't have much removal. This one also doesn't really answer Vivi all that well. I can maybe ramp Kefka out on turn 4. Is that good enough? Yeah, maybe we'll try. Can Surveil turn 1. Maybe play a tapped passage on 2 if we don't find anything else. Fear of missing out I can play. Although it would be unfortunate if I miss my third land drop untapped for either Connections or Midnight Clock. So maybe I look for some actual 2-mana ramp or just a land. Alright, Brainstorm should be decent. So this turn I could shuffle with Fabled Passage to get that out of the way. Could also fetch next turn if we only want to shuffle one card back. So, yeah, what's the play next turn? Probably Connections. And then turn after, I guess I'm still missing removal for Vivi. So I do think I want to shuffle 2 cards away. So, could also shuffle with Scalding Tarn to get extra Surveil. And then I don't think I need Firemind Vessel, since we already have Midnight Clock for a bit of acceleration. And then we can fetch end of turn. Having surveilled Fear into the graveyard, I can also maybe get it back with Kolaghan's Command. If they play an artifact we absolutely need to destroy. Alright, opponent keeps up double blue. So they could have a counterspell. We will surveil. And Reanimate isn't a bad one necessarily. Sure, I think I can keep it. It's cheap enough. Still try Connections. That resolves. But it might get bounced. It does not. So our opponent could play Vivi, maybe some 0-mana spell to immediately add counters to it. But they're on mono islands so far. We'll draw, make a treasure. And then could keep on ramping with Midnight Clock and Cold Steel Hearts. If this gets countered, I just play a tapped Lounge, I think. Opponent counter spells with a Midnight Clock. That's okay. Not gonna reanimate just yet. Maybe if Kefka gets countered, we can reanimate it for 1 mana. So there's Vivi with maybe mana to protect it. Treasure Cruise isn't bad. Could also play and perhaps escape Kroxa here. So I do think I start with Kroxa, as opposed to maybe playing Kefka, which only really gets countered by Serenade or Wash Away. So there's still a argument for Kefka first, while they're mostly tapped out, and then next turn we can make them discard a bunch. Sure. That resolved. Cold Steel can go. Hope they don't discard an artifact. They discarded Flusterstorm, so yeah, more cheap counter spells. Found our own Vivi and Emmet. So Emmet a little bit at odds with Treasure Cruise, since Emmet wants us to have a full graveyard. But we'll see. So our opponent gets to untap with Vivi. Can also think about transforming Kefka. But yeah, I would love to find some interaction to deal with Vivi, as our opponent's gonna increase its power, so they can now make at least 4 mana with the ability. So yeah, this turn could hurt. If there's an extra turn card involved, we could just be dead. Cyclonic Rift with Overload. Send everything packing, so now I regret not using my treasures. But does not appear that we're dead, at least. And Angran's Rampage is a perfect answer to Vivi, assuming they don't have a specific answer here. So I can maybe start there. Could also Kroxa, make them discard, and then still Rampage while being able to pay for Spell Pierce. Opponent ditching a disruption. Okay, make you sack a creature. And that works. Alright, now we should be in good shape. I can reanimate, again, the fear of missing out, perhaps. And then maybe still Treasure Cruise afterwards, or we start with Treasure Cruise and then give up on Croxa and Emmet. Yeah, that seems fine. Alright, and then reanimate Fear. At this point, can't really afford the life loss from connections. And then discard a land here. So we are at 8, but our opponent's gotta rebuild. They've got fewer cards in hand. Brawl makes a token.
Just have to. Thanks for the helping pop.
And get to untap. Alright, so let's say we play Vivi, can play Signet, and take it from there. Yeah, I guess if I play Fable, I wouldn't be able to call against command. Kind of like the idea of call against command here. Deal 2, make you discard. Attack Brawl with Delirium enabled.
You'd hurt a cute critter like me? Don't pounce on my fur.
So next turn we can maybe redeploy Kefka as our opponent replays Vivi.
Otter, I need some help.
And our opponent plays a land out since they would have maybe had to discard it anyway. Alright, I'll start with Kefka, ditching Guardian Idol. And then I can still cast Fable and play Emmet. Yeah, I guess I can play Fable, make blue with Vivi. Play Emmet. Could still top deck a Lightning Bolt. Go to attackers. Already 7 cards in graveyard again, so still a small chance we get to transform Emmet this game. Although transforming Kefka is going to be the priority. And yeah, our opponent has seen enough. They're going to lose Brawl and be pretty far behind. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing Vorinclex, mono green counters. What do we think of our hand? We do need to find a second blue for mana drain. Duress has a chance of missing if they're heavy on creatures. So there is a fail rate here, but I think we try. Don't expect a ton of removals, so Kefka transforming could be our game plan. And Shipwreck Marsh, I'll keep a land 3. It's not double red, but we have Celestus for fixing. So actually, don't hate, just Fear, discard Duress. Have a creature to protect Chandra. Now Chromox could also speed things up. Opponent with a medallion. Alright, so how about we just play Chandra here? Pitching the explosion. Gotta get our Planeswalker in play before Vorinclex shuts it down. Having the amount of loyalty. Sadly, no Goldspan Dragon. And then Chandra can set up Kefka next turn. Lotus Cobra into a land. And a Rampant Growth. Makes another landfall trigger. Incubation Druid. Still a bunch of mana available for Kami. Okay, so our opponent's gearing up. I would like to keep up mana drain. Can I do that and still play Kefka? Should be able to. Since we have just enough blue mana. So that works. Now Shocking in Watery Grave is going to be a little bit suspicious. I get to draw 2. I could Thoughtseize, but yeah, let's just keep up mana drain, play it safe. No attacks. Protect Chandra. Alright, there's Vorinclex. There's mana drain. And plus 6 mana is exactly what we need to transform Kefka. Now they can still potentially play Vorinclex next turn. And Rishkar. So yeah. Vorinclex can come down again next turn. But we'll make good use of this mana. Transform Kefka. Can attack, see what we draw, and then decide what to do with Chandra. Bolas's Citadel could be fun. Yeah, let's go for it, even though dealing damage with Chandra would also draw me 2 cards.
Yup, you're going.
I'm gonna go for not the arena, since that enters tapped. But yeah, I do have to play lands, and then Citadel. 3 life for Midnight Clock, and then a land I wouldn't be able to play. So I would have loved to draw a little bit more interaction. Gonna lose Chandra to Vorinclex here. But we've got our Ruler of Ruin on the battlefield, so that's all we could hope for. I guess Chandra might still survive here. One loyalty Chandra is good enough. And no counters on the Midnight Clock because of Vorinclex. Now Virtue is a little pricey in terms of life. Could shuffle it away, or we could plus Chandra to get rid of it.
This'll be easy.
So I'll decline, which lets me draw 2. Wash Away, not the best card to have on top. So I could start by attacking. Can I get to Delirium if I fetch? I can. So that's probably worth it then. Just fetch, get a mountain. So we can attack twice with Kefka. And then take it from there. So I'm about to draw 10 cards. No blocks. Could cast a Fatal Push before we draw. We've enabled Revolt already. I guess I have to be careful with also Lith moving counters around. But I think we still take out the Kami. And then I guess we also have multiple ways to remove artifacts now. And Kolaga's command can also go face. So that should do it. Alright, that was a fun way to end this game. There we go. Well, we finally got to transform Kefka, and it did not disappoint. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Ureni, so Temur, Dragon, Ramp. Our hand's got potential, mostly hoping they deploy some Ramp artifact we get to destroy. which is not a guarantee since they can just ramp using green spells. But there we see Chromox already. And Arcane Signets, so artifacts aplenty. I can play tapped Watery Grave, or we can Surveil. Although my turn 2 play is already scripted, so I can maybe wait. I do want to make sure to play my Mountain before I play Arena. So Dragon Sword is next, and a Rampant Growth. Well, that was an excellent start. Opponent can already cast Ureni next turn, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, yeah, that's probably game over here. If we're on the play, at least we can maybe call against command one of their artifacts. Alright, maybe they were missing a land. They had a Jasper instead. Now I can call against commands in their draw step, making them discard, destroying the Horde. And then they shouldn't be able to cast Ureni once again. I guess I can draw with a Horde end of turn, so then I can just... Nope, opponent did not use it. So we can let them draw. They can draw with a Horde in response. But it still seems like the most valuable artifact. Made them discard Opportunistic Dragon, which could have stolen the Guardian Idol. Now Desert Doom does get to attack and draw a bunch of cards. So I guess they could still second main cast Ureni. Yeah, Desert Doom is pretty good against discard spells in general. Alright, tapped Hedge Maze. And Lathalis, so yeah, we're gonna need to top deck a Sweeper here to have a chance. Damnation, Toxic Deluge are the types of cards we want. And I need to get a Mountain for Arena. Say no to the Lounge. And that's a land, so... Could play Hasty Kefka to draw and discard twice. Just dig as deep as possible for a Sweeper. Yeah, that's probably the plan. Start by ditching a land. Opponent had a creature, we draw 2. Yeah, I don't think Fel the Profane and Fatal Push are gonna cut it. So this is just discard and draw. A flame. Alright, so we lose Kefka. And we did not find what we were looking for. Opponent gets to cast Ureni, make another dragon. So unless I top deck Damnation here, we should be dead. Opponent going for the Shaman instead. We're at 8. Draw 3 with Desert Doom. And yeah, I think that's the end of the line. Can't redraw. I guess we could still draw into Toxic Deluge specifically. That's the only one that does it. But for all we know, if they draw into a counterspell. Alright, that's no Deluge. So at most I can Fatal Push the Shaman here. And a River Regent gets to draw and discard as well. Yeah, opponent just had a fast start on the play with the Chromox. That's gonna happen every now and then. GG's. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Davriel, mono black control. Our hand's got potential. Missing some cheaper mana acceleration. But Vessel, unless they make me discard it, I guess Mono Black should stick around, and then it sets up our Nicol Bolas, potentially on the following turn already. Wash Away can deal with Davriel. But we are potentially weak to some early threats. Alright, nothing so far. Can deploy Liliana next turn. Ideally setting up the -2, since I don't really want to discard anything. Alright, now with Chromox, I could pitch Liliana to cast a Vessel, but then Davriel will resolve. Although, I think that's okay when we can cast a Nicol Bolas on the following turn. Could also get rid of Wash Away, but I think I would rather have Wash Away left over as opposed to Liliana. Play Vessel. If they do have a discard spell for Nicol Bolas, we still have Kefka as a decent follow-up. And looks like no Davriel this turn. Now if they keep up removal, they could have Planeswalker removal at instant speed, although with the Takenuma we can maybe even get Nicol Bolas back. So I don't mind trying it. And get a Swamp. Cast Nicol Bolas. And I could also use the +1, essentially making them discard 2 cards.
No gods can protect you now.
Yeah, I think I prefer that, since that's guaranteed 2 cards gone, whereas the plus might not find anything useful, and their opponent was keeping up Soul Shatter. So, yeah, Nicol Bolas died right away, but it was still a 3-for-1. As we see Statue and Key exiled. Now time for Davriel.
Well, clearly my services are not.
So next turn I could try Mind Stone into Kefka, and then that'll also discount the channel ability on Takenuma. Opponent did get to draw 3. The drawback, their creatures are smaller, but they may not have a ton of creatures in the first place. So I suppose we can Kefka first, discarding the Mind Stone. Although I kind of want to keep the Mind Stone given our plan of returning Nicol Bolas. So then maybe Emmet goes. Go Mind Stone into Kefka. And leaving up Wash Away. Opponent also discarded Mind Stones, I'm glad we didn't. And now Bitter Triumph could take care of Davriel. They could -2 again, so that does seem worth it. Even though I won't be able to keep up Wash Away to counter it if they cast it for 6 mana. But I don't really see them doing it. Alright, so far so good. Small chance they fire up Hive and exile Nicol Bolas from my graveyard. But it seems unlikely, given that they have other ways to spend their mana. And we can also look into transforming Kefka for 8 mana, if they don't remove it first. Alright, the One Ring can protect them. So not a great turn to transform Kefka, since we wouldn't deal any damage. Opponent had a Reanimate, and gets back Emmet. Fair enough. They're pretty far from transforming it. And then they can still draw with the One Ring. Liliana's not a bad top deck here. Can just play it, make zombies. If I were to channel Abandoned Mire for 3, 4, 5, 6... Yeah, if I still had a land left over, I could cast Nicol Bolas. I guess I can still attack with Kefka, see what we draw, and if I draw a land, I can go for Nicol Bolas. So discard Wash Away, keep Liliana. Alright, found the land, so now I can get back Bolas. Does Bolas target the opponent? each opponent, so it does not target, so it gets around the 1 ring too. Surprised they're blocking. Alright. Fetch, can get an island. Channel. And welcome back, Nicol Bolas. Get your last 2 cards.
Rejoice, for your god Pharaoh has returned.
So now it's just 1 ring versus everything we have. They might have found another answer to Nicol Bolas. If not, it's gonna run away with the game, and our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing the partner duo of Vial Smasher with a blue-green commander. Hand seems fine. So, opponent on a 4-color deck. Surveil, Explosion, we already have Deluge, so that's probably not needed. Fetch Island, play Strix. And then try and have them overextend into the Deluge. Multiple creatures with 2 card types, which are good to discard with Kefka as well. Training Grounds, good combo with Thrasios. Can activate for 2 mana. Alright, I guess we'll play the Fear. And a land can go. Okay, maybe end of turn, Surveil again. And then we have a few options between Bolas, Shieldred, or maybe even Deluge. We're not great at dealing with enchantments, so the Training Grounds is going to stick around. And our opponent's just going to activate a bunch. Possible they still have a counter spell up. Heuristic Study, another enchantment. Although Shieldred's pretty good at punishing it. And a Shieldred's Edict is fine. Could also add it for Delirium. And then I do think we try and resolve Shieldred's while they're tapped out. And there's Vial Smasher. And our opponent keeps up mana. I gotta suspect some form of interaction here. Could try and get to Delirium by main phase casting something. Already have instant, sorcery, and land. So it would have to be a creature like Nicol Bolas. Maybe start by attacking with Prismari Command available. They might just be keeping up a counterspell for Kefka. So then going for Nicol Bolas maybe doesn't feel as bad if that gets countered. Or we can pass with Prismari Command, but it's not that exciting. So you can have a Nicol Bolas. Serenade counters. And we get a bird. Alright, so had I main phase cast Bolas, I guess we could have gotten to Delirium. Opponent falls to 9 from shielded triggers. Now the Overlord can deal 4. Also pretty good with Vial Smasher. And they have to pass it back once again with double blue available. So I don't think I want to try and tap out for a Liliana here, or even Kefka. But yeah, an attack. Maybe start with Bitter Triumph, taking out, I want to say, Vial Smasher. Then if they counter, I can still attack and finish off a creature with Prismari Command. Since the Fear gets to attack twice, or maybe let Shieldred attack twice. Possible they just remove Shieldred now. But I guess it would have to be a bounce spell. So that works. Can move to attackers. And our opponent concedes with Shieldred attacking twice. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Valki, red-black. Got a promising hand with the Chrome Mox. Good Croxa, turn 1. Get rid of Nicol Bolas, so Chrome Mox makes all 3 colors. And then hope to resolve Connections turn 2 to kind of catch back up in resources. Yeah, that seems okay. If they have a discard spell, turn 1 for the Connections, we could be in trouble. Opponent discarding a Deluge. Alright, so Connections resolves. Just gonna focus on drawing cards and making treasures. The Butcher's pretty aggressive. Dark Ritual is promising. And find Treasure Cruise. So we can go for Kefka now. Not guaranteed to survive by any means. But yeah, I guess I don't even have to use the Dark Ritual. Can save it to maybe redeploy it from the command zone once again. And then I'm pretty far from casting a Treasure Cruise. Hope they don't discard another sorcery. Alright, Grenzo discarded, so we get to draw 2. Maybe there's a chance we can set up Kefka's transformation with Dark Ritual. That would be the dream. But yeah, looks like they have Bedevil to answer it. To be expected. Butcher connects. At least Deluge is a relatively clean answer to the Butcher, since we don't take additional damage when it dies. A Lightning Bolt could answer it for 1 mana. Yeah, maybe the more aggressive play is still fine here. I guess I'll wait to Lightning Bolts, maybe that changes their decision on what to discard. And I will ditch maybe the Deluge now that we're just gonna bolt the Butcher. They discarded a land. And let's do this now before they get to potentially interfere. Because if they had a burn spell, they could have maybe combined it to take out Kefka. Cruel Claw dies to Chandra. I would love to see a transformation here. I think we stop drawing cards as well since we're at 10. 4, 5, 6, this is 8, so can't quite do it this turn. But I'm afraid that if I Chandra minus on Cruel Claw, our opponent's going to concede.
You and I are gonna take 'em out.
Attack, trigger Kefka. Probably should have kept Misty to get more blue. Alright, pass with a bunch of mana up. And then next turn transform Kefka if we get the chance. But our opponent's gone. Alright, so on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and it's the mirror match, so hopefully at least one of the two Kefkas gets to transform. Hand is keepable. Transformer even useful for setting up Nicol Bolas, since it makes colored mana. Fetch a red-black. And wouldn't mind drawing more lands here. Dark Ritual. I mean, that's also a way to ramp out Nicol Bolas. Even if it's maybe less reliable. Hopefully they don't pass with a bunch of mana up. They do. So yeah, now going for Ritual into Nicol Bolas is just asking for it to get countered. So I kind of need to brainstorm, hope to hit a land, especially a fetch land would be useful. Alright, we found it. And then cut to ribbons, not great since it doesn't answer Kefka. Could also ditch the Virtue of Persistence. And then I guess there is some upside to Surveilling now, since I could mill a creature to then reanimate for 1 mana. But let's just pass. Opponent flashes a Malcolm. Alright, so possible that resolving Nicol Bolas could have worked out. This is not a wizard, so I guess Malcolm implies the presence of more instant speed counter spells that they get to keep up alongside it. So then I'm just gonna try and hit my land drops naturally. Bolas probably gets countered since it would get in the way of Malcolm. Can still maybe reanimate it afterwards. And a Chandra isn't bad either. But we're starting to maybe draw a few too many 4 and 5 mana cards. I think hitting land drops is more important. Alright, so can just cast Bolas, get it countered. And then still have our Dragon God. And our opponent's just gonna bounce it back to hand. Keep Otawara. Malcolm up to 2 counters. At 4, we're potentially in danger. And our opponent taps out for Shieldred. Alright, perfect. So now we just get to Damnation to reset the board. Do I want to do anything else? Because with Dark Ritual, we can maybe still cast the Nicol Bolas as well, the 4 mana one. I think we save it. Could also reanimate the opponent's Shieldred, to be fair. That's maybe not a bad idea. The tables have turned. Shieldred punishes Kefka, drawing more cards. Opponent's looking at the graveyard, maybe a Delve spell. Dig through time. Alright, at least it wasn't a treasure cruise, which would have cost them a lot of life. Still leaving up double blue. So they get to go digging for an answer for Shieldred. Ideally, we use Nicol Bolas as an answer to Kefka. Still have the Ravager as something that's fine to resolve, but is not a disaster if it gets countered. And Bitter Triumph takes care of Shieldred, so now the coast is clear for our own Kefka, and with Wash Away we can counter the opponents. So that seems fine, or I could still go for the Dragon God, but I kind of want to resolve the commander here. And then I think it's goodbye to Dark Ritual, unless we want to keep it to transform Kefka, just to see it in action. I think the correct play is discard Dark Ritual, but just because I want to see a Kefka transformation, I'll keep it in hand here. And then keep up Wash Away. And I'm sorry. Alright, so our opponent concedes, so yeah, next turn with Dark Ritual, we could flip Kefka, and then attack, making the opponent lose 5, drawing 5 in the process, and then we're pretty far ahead, or we can get Nicol Bolas going to diversify our threats. So we get to see our Grixis mid-range deck in action, and yeah, Kefka is a pretty awesome curve topper for a deck that has a varied number of card types, but it doesn't need a ton of help to really make it worth it, since it often provides 2 cards when it enters, and can provide even more value when we get to transform it, even if it doesn't happen all that often. So yeah, that's gonna do it for today's gameplay. Wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.